Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Something went wrong with the link, so always great to have a crappy link out there. So give everybody a second to find us. The ongoing troubles with YouTube. So it's always strange how talks evolve for me over time. I usually am up most of the, usually thinking about my talks late at night is usually where I go. I keep little notebooks all over the house, kind of write down ideas and stuff about talks. And when my kids are in here watching TV, I'll often just sit on the ground and lay on the floor and read books. Just waiting for inspiration. I've been reading some really great books. I've been reading a big book on Paul. I've been reading another book on anarchy, existentialism, and then dived back into a Dr. King book this week, and that really inspired me. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So good morning. Welcome to Revolution. Welcome, welcome. Good morning, everybody. Greet your neighbor. So I'll just jump right into the talk. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was the outcome. We talk about conflict a lot. We talk about disagreeing a lot. But the importance is, and I think we saw this last week with the Paul talk as well, is what's the goal of the outcome? What is the goal? The goal is mercy and conflict, and if we're in conflict, to get mercy out of that. The goal is justice and grace. These are things that are very valuable for us to for us to focus on. So we're going to start. We are going to start, where did I put it? Matthew, if you're following along. I'll be in Matthew today. Also, I started a new job this week, so that's been pretty crazy. I started working on painting apartments and changing out. Hello, Linda and Chuck. So good to see you. So I've been changing out light fixtures and all the stuff, making sure we don't paint over them. And painting, doing a lot of painting, which I thought I was in better shape, but after painting, I've realized I get sore pretty easy. So that's pretty crazy. But yeah, so I worked all week last week, full job. So that was pretty cool. I'm bummed that I didn't get the one at the school working with special needs kids, but hopefully that'll be something down the road. So that's really helpful with the bills and such. Okay, my kids are fighting. I love you guys, but I gotta go deal with this. I'll be right back. Talk to yourselves. Grape nuts, neither grape nor nuts. Discuss. Sorry, everybody, dad duty. All right, let's get back to this. So I'm doing that a bit. So that's interesting. It is tough because when I'm so used to working on my talks. I'm so used to to working on my talks at night. But man, when you come home exhausted all day, it's a bit more of a challenge to think about these things. But it's good too because it helps rest my mind a bit because I'm an overthinker, so I'm always thinking and thinking and thinking. So it's nice to be exhausted every now and then. So anyhow, but the outcome. Well, it's always been about the outcome. I think that's why a lot of us do our work, and often, and it's interesting to think about what outcomes we want to see, and what we'll do to see those outcomes. I'm not going to hit that on the head right now, but we might hit it in a few minutes. But so earlier this week, I was thinking about this was this kind of compelled to forgive type of thing. I'm compelled to forgive. And I started thinking more about that word compelled. And being compelled by forgiveness, by the outcome of forgiveness and what that does and how you experience grace, in a way that goes forward and backwards, like a two-way street, and it's really kind of this forgiveness often works a lot like grace because it causes the person that you're forgiving, often if they don't even ask, but it causes them to reflect and think about not just what they've done, but why they've been forgiven and what's the importance of that and what's the value of that. And the person who does the forgiving, I don't think that's a one-time process. Now, I don't mean you go back to the same person. I forgive you again, you jerk. But that sometimes you have to kind of work those things over the years. It's not like you just I've forgiven them and you're a saint and you don't think about what's happened to you ever again, or you're not, wiser or smarter from whatever its situation was. But there's always this kind of compelled thing to do because it does have this continued work. It's almost like infinite type of work when we forgive others and when we love others especially. And so I've always been compelled to love others and to work with others and to care for others. This is my where I feel the most myself is often right here sitting in front of a little camera. Talking to you folks, or if I'm doing a service or I'm speaking somewhere, I feel compelled to speak. I feel compelled to encourage people to seek out a better life for all people in the world. And so you get this compelled to do things. And we're going to kind of look at where does that go and what's the outcome of that compellingness. So Matthew 9:13. We've talked a lot about this verse before in Matthew 9 because it's, when Paul goes to Matthew's house. Is it Matthew 9 or 10? It's actually Matthew, yeah. Matthew 9, sorry. We're Matthew 9, 13. But one verse that often gets overlooked is in 13 where, Pharisees come and see Jesus eating with sinners and tax collectors and all this. And they're like, why does he eat with such sinners, And then Jesus says to them, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. He's telling them why, these are his people. And at 13, he goes, now go learn what this means to them. But he goes, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And that's after that. So when he says, I've come to call sinners, not those who think they're righteous, but I want you to and those two lines together for I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners. Right before that, to say, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, which he's quoting Hosea, gives us an idea of how we're supposed to treat others. And he goes, I want mercy, not sacrifice. But often in the church, often in many faiths, often in life, we teach sacrifice. We teach it's about a sacrifice. You got to give up everything. It's a free gift, and it costs you everything. The old bait and switch, idea of a faith that I grew up with. Oh, it's free. Just raise your hand. I see that hand. I see it. And then they make you come up in front of them after they've told you to be secret about it. So I've always thought that was a weird way to do things, but I grew up that way, and I still thought it was a little bit bizarre. But this idea of I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And so for me, the mercy is part of the outcome. It just, these things move like boom, boom, boom. So you're like, okay, we want peace. Or let's say, um, there's something we're working towards. I'm trying to think of an example that's not so big. But, you know, two groups are arguing, they're not getting along. Let's go in there and let's have this conversation and let's help bring peace together. Let's help these folks understand that they're disagreeing well, but and so you go in there and you have that conversation, and people agree and they see it, but that's not the end of the end of the issue. The end of the issue, you have to stay and you have to help each other get to know each other and people to work together. It's progress, not perfection. People to learn to respect differences and things like that. So, it's not nothing's built in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. But this idea of coming in and realizing that we have different outcomes. Peace process takes a long time. Just learning to disagree well is great. But at what point do we learn to get along well and to be in a community with one another and to respect the diversities of the different folks that we're in community with, and continue that relationship and that friendship? I mean, that's a really important thing. And so I was thinking about that. It just been on my mind. I was thinking about how my mom, when she found out Jerry Falwell died, and how she wept and cried, and how many nuances were in that moment that words just couldn't do it justice. I mean, she had lost an enemy, but she had also lost somebody she cared about. My mom used to always say, God loves everybody. We're all made out of the same old dirt. And she always had that idea of like, we're all the same. We have to be together, despite race or theology or philosophy or religion, or politics. We're all the same. Gay, straight, black, white, whatever. We're all made of the same old stuff. She saw this common humanity constantly that kept her connected to people. And she even saw that within her own enemies. And I always found that to be really inspiring, especially since, my mom's kitschy and she's silly and she's funny, but there was like this depth that she had that was really beautiful and was contagious, and that's what happens as you get when you're around that type of love, you become compelled by that type of love. You become compelled by that. I remember when Fall, I remember thinking like, well, at least he's not going to hurt anybody else. That was my very liberal response. At least he's not going to hurt somebody. And then somebody at the table was like, "Ding dong, the witch is dead," and I've heard a lot of people say that as well. But my mom kind of knew the impact and where our life was and where we were as a family. I mean, like that one person we trusted, it turned out to be wrong, changed our lives. It's kind of like when David cried over King Solomon in a way. It was really powerful. But that's that mercy that I think my mother's always had. And see, I was always raised the idea that it was about sacrifice. And I think if we get to the idea of loving our enemies as mercy rather than sacrifice, it changes our view of things. It changes how we see things. You're like, oh, I'm a Christian, I have to love my enemies. Oh man, and it's this idea that we're showing like we're having to sacrifice our emotions and our feelings. But then it's going like, well, maybe this is a way of showing mercy, and not just mercy to them, but mercy to myself, because maybe I'll learn something from them as well. Sometimes you have to go like, maybe I'm in the wrong. I know it's impossible for you guys to be in the wrong, but still. But to go in it with an idea of mercy rather than sacrifice, when we're trying to build bridges, and it makes it a little more interesting. I always try to, like in my critiques and things, it's always about hoping that we get to a place where we're showing more mercy to one another. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to rip the Band-Aid off and say, listen, we're treating each other like crap. We're tearing each other apart, you know. And the hope is that we come to the realization like, well, maybe we should be a little bit kinder to one another. Maybe we should show a little bit more, maybe we should build one another up. Honestly, I feel like there's so little of that in the world right now and in Christianity. I have a few friends that really are great at like building up and showing care and love and mercy. But usually people in my life are telling me what I need to do, or that I'm not doing enough, or that it's not good enough, or that it's not this and it's not meeting this expectation or that expectation. Um, you know, and I have to just hunker down and know who I am. That's why I love my mom's book, I Gotta Be Me, right next to Garfield. My son just put that up before the service. He likes you guys to see that he has a Garfield there. Um, but that like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to quit revolution and then go do this thing, because the revolution is what I'm compelled to do it. I can't do anything else. This is what I want to do. This is what gives me reason and purpose and gets me up in the morning. This is something that has to be done. This is the work that lets me feel complete and whole. It might not always pay the bills, but it's what completes me. And so I'll do other things if I have to in order to do this work, because I'm compelled to do this. But we're so often don't realize that we too much negativeness can discourage people when we're so I get it, because I'm not always the most positive person in the world, and I try to remember that when I'm speaking. I try to like, oh, I need to go back and talk to that person in a different way. I need to be more encouraging. And how I would talk to someone who's a leader or someone who is an influencer or that type of thing is a little bit different than how I'm going to talk to somebody else. Sometimes I feel like people who are leaders and ministers and things like that is valuable. It's valuable to talk to them honestly. It's valuable to just, but often I'm surprised, like, because I'm a really sensitive person. I take things really personally. It's very easy. And that's honestly, I think, why I do this work, is because I know what it's like to feel all these feelings. But, as a leader, I also know that, if someone confronts me or another leader confronts me, then we're going to we need to have an important conversation, because we're looking at the bigger picture. And sometimes when you're looking at the bigger picture, you're trying to help people. And hey, we could do this better. We could do that better. And sometimes you can do that better. I guess what I'm saying is remember to have a little bit of compassion and mercy within that time. Disagreeing, protesting, is part of the work, but it's only part of the work. Like protesting against things. What happens when we win the protest, when we get what we want? Then it's time to, everybody's like, let's get Nelson Mandela out. And we got free Nelson Mandela. Well, then one day Nelson Mandela got out and he became the president. And what happened from there? And he made more of an inclusive government, not a perfect government, but he made more of an inclusive government, obviously, for people, and didn't imprison all the people that were part of apartheid. He ended up using some of them to work with some of them, because the process. This was it. This was the vision. It was like, oh, we want to get him out. But often you'll see people, like I've seen this happen before, where everybody's working for these prisoners' rights. We got to get this guy free. Get this guy free. He was wrongly convicted. And then they get the person out of prison and everybody forgets about the person. They forget that the person needs to eat, needs to have 3 meals a day, needs a paying job. They get us intention, all these rock stars, all these musicians, all these people, all these actors, showering this guy, he was wrongly convicted. And then the person gets out of prison and they die of a drug overdose, or they die homeless, or they die all this. They only one injustice, and they don't go like, well, let's make sure this person has a good life. Let's make sure that, when we help them get out, that their life isn't, we got them out of prison. That was it, So I think sometimes we don't take a look at the bigger picture. We only look at one part and don't realize, like, well, do we really want to affect someone's life? Or are we just fighting a system? And does this person really not matter at all? Or does this person matter? And I think what we have to realize is that all people matter. And that's what we're trying to talk about at Revolution, is that, all these people, are human beings. And if we're all made out so that we're all important. So it's that continued mercy, that continued bigger picture, rather than getting to one spot and go, well, what do we do after that? Or, oh, we've done it. Now what? Because it would be really easy for things to just go back to the way they were. When someone's on parole, for example, it's really easy for them to do one thing, even just be in a house with a gun or a car with a weapon. They're back in prison. So those are all those type of things of like, what's the plan here? What's the bigger picture? And so I often feel that I have this bigger picture view, but sometimes that gets you in trouble because you're looking at this one thing. So we got to stop this so we can get to the bigger picture, and everybody's caught up in this. So that can be tough as well. Sorry, I'm all over the place, but I think we're going to get to where we need to go right now, because we're going to turn over to Luke. Hey, if you're following us here, that's great. Please do like and subscribe. That really helps Revolution. And if you're listening to us on any of the different podcast places, if you can review us or like us or whatever they do over at those different places, leave us a 5-star review, something like that. We'd be grateful. So I'm going to jump over to, I need to get more Post-its so I can mark my Bible better. Luke 10. I don't know if you guys remember, but I lost my Bible not too long ago. And so this is a new Bible, so it's like finding everything again. I thought this was Luke 10. Oh, here it is. Yep. Luke 10:25 is where we're at. Luke 10:25 is where we're going to be at. And we'll kind of try to go through this. I took a lot of notes, and I want to make sure I get to these notes because I feel like they were really important. So let's look at what we've covered so far. The work must have a goal of justice and reconciliation. And so after we've reached the goal, is there going to be justice is going to live there? Is reconciliation going to live there? Are we going to make sure that people are integrated and stay integrated, and that there's that justice and that people learn to live in equality? Maybe there's some ways that we foster healing, that type of thing. Nothing will change in the long term unless the goals for the long term exist as well. So having those goals after the initial, we've got this done, now what do we do? For example, if we got the arms embargo, or if there was the war stopped and in Israel and Palestine stopped, there would still be much more work to do to create peace and to hopefully find a two-state solution. And how do we do that? And how do we have this? There has to be more conversation. There has to be more work done. It can't just be like, oh, that's done, let's move on and post about something else. There's always this continued work that we often forget, and especially now in society with everything's just a headline, boom, 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 boom. So Luke 10:25 is the story of the Good Samaritan. And the point of today is not necessarily the Good Samaritan, but what happens when what we think like the Good Samaritan. So I'm going to read it real quick, and then I'm going to just go over it. But it says here, just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what it is written in the law. What do you read in there? He answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live. So it's not raising your hand with every eye closed and every head bowed, and then standing up in front of a people. It's loving God and loving others and loving your neighbor as yourself. Interestingly enough. He goes, and he said to him, yes, you have given the right answer. Do this and you will live. But this man decides to push a little bit farther, maybe hoping to push Jesus into a type of theological debate. Maybe trying to show that, it's not that simple. really tries to put things on the line, maybe even question the work that he's seen Jesus do. Who knows? This is where he goes. Because, but wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And this is where it gets interesting for all of us. And so please listen. Jesus replied this: a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance the priest was going by the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. And I always think about how many times I've passed by people who probably needed my help on the other side. I mean, it's, you know, and we can maybe justify it because we're like, oh, I'm in a whole different world. But I was reading some people's ideas of what the justification of these guys were, is how the road's really windy and you couldn't see behind it. So maybe he was a trap, or maybe other people had attacked him, or maybe they were, you know, the priest was not allowed to touch other people that weren't, you know, were unclean. All these different excuses. We always have excuses and we always have reasons. Oh, society's different now, you know. We always have a reason not to be the Good Samaritan. It's just always the way it is. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. Now remember, Samaritans were considered, and this is awful, but they were considered half-breed people. They weren't considered, Jews did not, like, they were not friends with each other. They were separate from each other. Jews saw them as unclean people and pushed them away. But here a Samaritan sees this Jewish man beat up on the side of the road. But the Samaritan, while traveling, came near him. And when he saw him, he was moved with pity, or compelled, if you will. I like to think about him being compelled at that moment. Moved with it. So he went to him, bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to the inn, and took care of him. The next day he took the 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and when I come, I will repay whatever more you spend. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And the lawyer answers back, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. So once again, we see this in a different place. Jesus saying, I want you to show mercy. I don't want your sacrifices. Now here you could see mercy being involved with sacrifice, of taking a chance, helping someone who maybe you consider an enemy or not worthy of your own help, or that type of thing. But he was compelled to help this person. And here's the thing I think a lot of us think about is this, is if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? If I stop here and do this, is this, you know, is this a bad decision? Is this just going to be too complicated? Is this going to take away from my day? Is this going to take away from my life? Can I lose my, you know, or what, you know? But what happens here is, but instead, he asks, if I don't stop and help him, what will happen to him? So this is the mercy that the Good Samaritan. There's a really funny. There's a really funny talk about this, a comedy skit by these guys named Mitchell and Webb. They're these British comedians on the Good Samaritan. And the whole point is that he calls them Good Samaritans, and people are like, what's wrong with Samaritan, Jesus? Oh, the Good Samaritan, what are not Samaritan? It's really funny. I recommend you checking it out because it's worth a laugh. At no point does Jesus call him the Good Samaritan. Whoever just decided to title the verses calls it the Good Samaritan. But the one who showed him mercy, that's what we're going at. And so the question is not what will happen to me, but what will happen to him. What will, you know, this is the question. So I was also reading some of Dr. King, and I looked up one of his talks that I know he gave on the Good Samaritan. And a lot of this is probably inspired by this very talk anyway. So what's the problem? But I wanted to share something that Dr. King said. And this is really powerful, I think. This is Dr. King, Reverend Martin Luther King from Strength to Love. Great book. I got this at the King Center. What are the devastating consequences of this narrow group centered attitude? It means that one does not really mind what happens to people outside of his group. And if American is concerned only about his nation, he will, oh, that's not the one I wanted to read, guys. Sorry. Where is it? Oh, yeah, there it is. Sorry. We'll get back to that one in a second because I think that's important as well. If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But by the very nature of his concern, the Good Samaritan revisited this question. Oh, yep, this is where I got it. If I do not stop and help this man, what will happen to him? The Good Samaritan engaged in dangerous altruism. We so often ask, what will happen to my job, my prestige, or my status if I take a stand on this issue? Now, Dr. King is speaking from example because when Dr. King, it took him about a year to speak out on Vietnam. And he was really moved by a magazine article that he saw, and he just realized he couldn't be silent anymore. Even though he knew it would cost people questioning him, like, aren't you a civil rights leader? You're not some peace leader. You're not some hippie. You're not supposed to get involved in this stuff. You have to stay focused on your work, on equal rights and social justice. You don't do this war stuff. And he said, oh, no, I have to, because we're all caught up in this together. We're all human beings. We're all one. Dr. King became very unpopular at the end of his work because he was doing the Poor People's Campaign. So it wasn't just civil rights for one community, it was equality for all. And people felt he was losing direction a little bit. And this often happens when we have to take a stand. So he goes, so we often ask, what will happen to my job, my prestige, my statue, if it takes a stand on this issue? Will my home be bombed? And it was. And so was John Hume's, ironically. Will my home be bombed? Will my life be threatened? Or will I be jailed? The good man always reverses the question. Albert Schweitzer did not ask, what will happen to my prestige and security as a university professor and to my status as a Bach organist if I work with the people of Africa? But rather he asked, what will happen to these millions of people who have been wounded by the forces of injustice? If we do not go to them, Abraham Lincoln did not ask, what will happen to me if I issue the Emancipation Proclamation and bring an end to chattel slavery? But he asked, what will happen to the Union and to the millions of black folks if I fail to do it? And so often we ask, what will happen to me? I'll have to admit, earlier on with my own concerns about Palestine, and the Palestinian people in Gaza, at first I wasn't saying much because I was like, oh, what? I don't want to look like I'm anti-Semitic, and we've got to walk a fine line here, and you have to be careful. And I have so many Jewish brothers and sisters who I really love, and I don't want to hurt their, I went through all this, and then at one moment it became, okay, I can't be silent anymore. There was a photo I saw, there was an article I read, and I said, I just can't be silent anymore. But you do question. I mean, it is very human to go, well, what will happen to me? Will I be rejected by people? Will I be called a hypocrite? But you didn't speak out soon enough. All these different types of things that go through your mind when you want to take a stand on something that's not nearly popular. I mean, I've had friends of mine saying like, hey, you got to let Kamala win before you start talking about this. You can't, you can't bring her up in it, and you can't bring Joe Biden up. You got to wait. And my thing is I'm compelled to do things. And so when I'm compelled to do things and when I'm moved by mercy, I can't shut up. And that's often, maybe sometimes an Achilles heel. I remember when I became LGBTQ affirming, I was calling pastors. I had a hashtag on Twitter, "Are you gay affirming?" And I may have pushed a little too far because there are some pastors who are now affirming, but do not want to talk to me about it because they felt like I was maybe a little bit hard on them, pushed them a little too much. But sometimes that's where you go. That's where the compellingness of speaking truth and justice and peace and going, these are fellow human beings that deserve equality. the same rights as we. Or our brothers and sisters are dying and being bombed by $20 billion worth of over $20 billion worth of our own weapons. These people's lives are being taken. I've seen adults carrying their dead children down the road. Like I saw a thing today that said about 70% of the deaths have been children. Was it 70? That seems quite high. I'll have to recheck, but it was a very high number. So, women and children dying in these horrific things. And we get quiet because we start thinking about things like this. We start thinking how it's going to affect our lives. Dr. King wrote, the real strategy of such a narrow provocalism is that we see people as entities or merely as things. Too seldom do we see people in their true humanness. A spiritual myopa limits our vision to extend to external accidents. We see men as Jews or Gentiles, Catholics and Protestants, Chinese or American, Negroes or white. We fail to think of them as fellow human beings made from the same basic stuff, sounds like my mom, the same old dirt, the same basic stuff as we, molded in the same divine image. And that's the Good Samaritan didn't see his enemy. He saw a fellow human being laying on the road who needed to be cared for, who needed to be loved. And so sometimes you have to be willing to put it on the line to say, I have to see these human beings because something big. I honestly think sometimes, I've honestly been thinking that I feel like the soul of our country is really in a bad place when I see my own silence and other people's silence on how we've become so afraid of each other to be able to speak out for this type of stuff. How we're so afraid of the political race that we're like, we won't condemn the government because we're afraid that this guy over here is going to become president if we do it. And that's why I did this talk where I said I felt like I was caught between Project 2025 and genocide, like a rock and a hard place. You're just like, and it did take me a while to speak up. It's been really disheartening to see people who've reached out to me who have not liked that I'm speaking up. And some of these folks have been people who are part of like tribal groups and things like that. And I'm going like, really? Like, how? I get it because I was just there, but the fear was out of respect for my Jewish brothers and sisters and wanting to make the right decision. And I'm not trying to justify myself. I'm a human being. We all drag ourselves. We all make mistakes. I should have been talking about LGBTQ people 5 years earlier. I believed it. I just didn't say it. I was afraid to speak out. But talking about Gaza and Israel, it's not about where they're at. It's about human lives. It's about saving lives as the goal and creating a safe place for people to live and hopefully find a peaceful alternative, much like happened in Northern Ireland, So it has to be, it really can't be about us. If we really care for people, we talk. It's funny that we talk so much about American nationalism. I see a lot of us on the left saying, whoa, we got to get rid of that Christian nationalism ideas. But as soon as we think that it might affect our America, our liberal America, our progressive America, we become silent on genocide. And I think we've got to question ourselves why. Is this the way? Or maybe see this as an opportunity to say it's during a political season, we got to speak up because maybe this is the time that real change will happen. Maybe we can help put them between the rock and a hard place rather than us having to feel like this rock and a hard place and feeling empty and feeling like our taxes are going and killing people. and hearing candidates say, we're not going to do anything about it. And you're just going like, the majority of Americans don't want billions of dollars supporting this war, supporting this genocide. But here we are. Here we are. Here we are, folks, the dream we all dream of. No, here we are in this place, in this position of keeping our of fear, living in fear and being afraid to speak out. I do hope that some of the people who are dealing with this issue and struggling with this issue helps them, give them more compassion down the road for other people who maybe have not spoke up, maybe not spoke up on their behalf or things like that, because they get afraid and they get fear that things are going to change and they're not going to be able to support their family, or they're not going to be able to pay their rent, or they're not going to be able to do the job that they feel compelled to do if they say something. That's often the case that I found with a lot of people, or people, oh, I'm going to do an inside job and do the work from the inside. You know, you hear a lot of stuff like that. But it really can't be about us. It's got to be about them. And so what my point was with the nationalism, the Christian nationalism, is it's seen like, it almost seems like there's a type of liberal nationalism as well that says, you know, our way of life is more important than the Palestinians' way of life. So we got to get through this so we can have a good life. And we'll have to wait to talk about them. But I just don't believe the Palestinian people have that much time. How many more children do we have to see going through this? I saw a picture of a baby that was a dead baby, buried him for the burial. You know, I mean, these little kids parents running down the street with dead children, a parent being carried away who had been killed, with a little boy running behind him calling out, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." You know, it's hard because when I share some of this stuff, people are like, well, there's casualties in every war. I mean, the justification that people find to support war. I mean, that's another thing, is I wish we've got all this technology and we haven't figured out a better way to solve problems than continuing to kill one another. But I believe if we follow the Christian stance, I believe if we call Christ, we are called to be peacemakers, and we are called to worry about all human life, not just some human life. So what if we talk about scapegoating, division, etc.? What will happen to me? There's another question. I have, I know my own thing of harping on scapegoating and division and things like that, and talking to different people has not won me any favors. It doesn't win you favor necessarily when you go in. And it doesn't win you a lot of favor when you're focusing on your own side. And that's one of the focuses I've tried to do, because that's what I learned in the 12 steps, is to kind of focus on your side of the street, and then maybe help the other person. Maybe get the log out of your eye and then help them get the plank out of theirs, I mean, you get the plank out of your eye and the sliver out of their eye. I think we both have probably planks at this point. We're fighting with our planked eyes, sword fights. That's what it feels like. But, and I get kicked back, and, I've lost my influence, and that's what it is. It is what it is. That's just part of it. But when you're compelled to do something, those type of things, but being compelled to do things takes time. I mean, when you start reading, that's why I put up this thing about reading Dr. King. When you read Dr. King, it might be the end of your career, because you start reading this stuff and you go, no wonder people didn't want this guy around. He was so focused on all human beings at the end of his career that everybody felt like, well, he's not focused on me. He's not focused on my main concern. He's not focused on my ultimate concern. Why do we want him here? He's getting involved in things. He's lost his political influence. He's living there. He's doing all these things. Why do we run him around? Now he's, a troublemaker, and now he's dead, and we have statues, and we realize that it was the right way. And so I think we should learn to live in that, and also try to celebrate that when the living are with us. And in my notes here, I'm just going down the order of my notes, What if I speak out for the LGBTQ community? What will happen to me? But equality is the goal, and was the goal. The other needs us. But also reconciliation was the goal. As soon as I started seeing my LGBTQ brothers and sisters having more pastoralship, pastors, and the ELCA come in, and now the I think the Methodists have just recently become around, and I think half of the Presbyterians, starting to see this happen. I was able to step back and go like, okay, you guys got this. This is your, I'm here to help if you want me, but I don't want to be like the straight white guy who's explaining everything. But there was a goal that reached, and that goal is still continuing. It's still happening, but it's grown a lot more since we got gay marriage and we got all these different denominations and Christians being open to this type of idea of complete inclusion. And reconciliation is still the goal within that. One of the things we don't think, I don't think, we hear enough about is being compelled, really to be like compelled to show compassion and mercy to your enemies. And I learned that really growing up with my mom, and then spending time with Dr. King, and not physically obviously, but in his books, and Bayard Rustin's writings, John Hume's writings, Gandhi's writings, a lot of books on nonviolence. Jesus, obviously, Paul, don't bite and devour one another, all these things. Of this idea of being compelled to love one's enemies, compelled to do this, to do this work and see a bigger picture, arise and let grace do what grace does, to transform people's lives, to transform one another. But when we are compelled to also love our enemies and show compassion and mercy to our enemies, you will find that sometimes they're not only your enemies, they're other people's enemies as well, and you're compelled to reach out to them. The other people those are still their enemies are going, why are you going to the enemy? Why are you talking to the enemy? I posted that I had just done this Christian, evangelical Christian television station, and I probably had the most leftist people, which was really weird, two of the most leftist guys who follow me, say, oh, you're being brainwashed, oh, you're being gaslit, and I was like, oh, I thought these guys would be like, oh, cool, you're doing the right thing. One guy came back and apologized, which was really cool. But this work of trying to be compelled to love your enemies, because when I saw my mom face to face with an enemy, she always showed him grace. And then when I saw her behind their backs, she still showed him grace. I watched my father do the same thing. And honestly, as a teenager, as a young person and a teenager, I always thought they were awful. I thought this was wrong. I thought they were naive. I thought, who does this? And now I've grown up with a similar conviction. And I've seen it happen with, like, John Hume did it, and he was a Catholic. And the IRA, which were also Catholic, bombed his house because they didn't want him loving the enemies. He didn't want him making an inclusive goal of Ireland. He's like, no, we're got to get what we want, and they can't get what they want. And John Hume said, we have to come together, and we all have to make sacrifices and compromise and come together to get a better Ireland. And so often when that compulsion happens for us to even love our enemies, and to see restoration, and to see grace, and to see the bigger picture, and to see the long game of this is going to be continuous work down the road, it's not as exciting. It doesn't get people as excited about things. It's tough, it's scary, and it will also make you often the enemies of people who were not your enemies before, because they will feel like you're betraying them, or that you're winking at something, or you're allowing something bad to happen. And people will lose interest, because I don't want to do that. It's much easier for me to talk about them as bad people and as enemies people and as what's wrong, and I can say what's right. But if we work together, then that kind of blurs the lines. What do we do then? Oh, well, then we're all human beings living in this really weird way of having to learn to live together and find unity through diversity and having to respect each other's differences. And that's difficult work. And I don't think most of us want to put the work in that requires. But that is realizing that all people are human. That's being the Samaritan and going, this person is worthy of living. This person needs someone to save them. What's going to happen to them if I don't help them? What's going to happen to the Palestinian folks if we don't talk about it? If we don't demand action? If we don't go and get into the streets and protest and do these type of things, what will happen to these people, and can they survive this, and can I be silent for so many months just so the United States is taken care of, and let them die because I want to be able to have the comfort and the freedom that I have here? So those are hard questions, and I can't pretend to know the answers to all those questions, but those are the things questions we should be asking ourselves, and asking ourselves why this makes us uncomfortable, and taking a good look at ourselves, because that's comes back to that I've got to be me. I've got to say things that are unpopular. I've had people say, well, I think you just have this like unconscious death drive in your work, and you just want to ruin your work, and so you take these big stands and you're trying to to destroy yourself. And I'm glad to say, after about a year and a half of the psychoanalysis, that was not the case. The case is that I just feel compelled to do this type of work. I took all these notes. Like, I have like my talk, and then I have my notes on the talk, and I really want to just talk about those as I can. See if there's anything I've left out. So far as these goals, these long-term goals, like I was thinking about deconstruction. That's something we talk a lot about today, and seems like makes conservatives nervous for some reason. I don't understand it necessarily why it makes them nervous, but I also feel like deconstruction is starting to lose its meaning because everybody has a different idea of what it is. But even deconstruction has the goal of a better life, of treating yourself better and treating others better. I mean, that's the role, that why people are deconstructing. They're not deconstructing to hurt people or do anything. The goal is to find peace. The goal is to say, can I still live with this faith in my life? Or are there too many contradictions to how I feel about my own life and my own views of things, that I can't stay, or I can't stay? There needs to be, I've been hurt, and was I hurt justified, by these people or not? So deconstruction has that idea of a better life. And when you're done deconstructing, my hope is that you come back and go, okay, this is what I realized, and this is what I saw, and let's make the church a safer place. Let's make the church a better place. Let's be honest with one another. In Christianity, the one goal that I don't think we're able to have is defeating people. To defeat people and then just move on. Defeating a system, yes, but that is only part of the work, because that's when reconciliation and working to bring unity through diversity begins. So when we stand up against a unjust system, $20 billion to continue dropping bombs on Gaza, things like this, when we see these things and we stand up to these unjust systems, and if we get the peace that we seek for, then becomes the conversation of reconciliation and working to bring unity and diversity, and working towards the idea of, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. Let's put checks and balances. Let's see things change, so we can learn to love all life. That we're not this country that just continues to just fund bombs or send wars or do all these type of things. Violence is not a Christian ideal. There's a lot of it in the Old Testament, but when Jesus comes, he kind of changes things and says, oh, you used to hear this, you used to say this, but now I say this. And so those are things, and that's some things that just a lot of people can't grasp. They think the only way for it to work is, we've got to have war to stop these people, to shrink these people down, to kill these people, but we also have to hopefully realize what these people are and who these people are, and write better books and have better talks and better things where they can also see the humanity of others as well, that we can get into other people's hands so we can start to recognize the other and respect one another's diversity. Again, religion, sexuality, race, where you're born is all accidents. All universal accidents. You were just happened to be born that, I happen to be born this. I was raised this way, you were raised that way. These are just accidents by birth. Accidents by birth, which we kill each other over, which we destroy each other over, which we judge one another over. And that's not the way. That's not the way of following Christianity. That's not the way of following Christ. It's definitely a way, but it's not the way that I feel human beings should be called to help. I think we should be called to help one another, care for one another, love one another. And if we want to do that, then we need to speak up. And unfortunately, the church hasn't set, in America especially, has not set the greatest example for that. And so we can speak to that. But I hope we speak with that with reunion in mind, not just to be like, well, we just want to destroy this group of Christians and get them out, and they'll stop caring about Christianity. They'll stop practicing it. We just get rid. It's like, how do we restore these people? How do we restore these movements? How do we restore these denominations? And the only way it's going to work is if we come together. And I think one of the ways we could come together is realizing that we all live in a society where there are basic needs that we all have: meals, staying alive, health care, jobs that pay well, rent that's affordable. If we start to pay attention to more of the common good, maybe something beautiful will grow from that. Where we're going, okay, let's continue with the common good on this. Let's not, it's not, we want to see our neighbors taken care of, my brothers and sisters taken care of. Everyone is my neighbor. The Samaritan is my neighbor. The one who shows me mercy is the neighbor, is the better neighbor. So we're called to be neighbors and love our neighbors and to show mercy. So what do? We have to do that. And so maybe we can start by planting seeds in the ground of a better life for everyone. I think the church has always made the mistake of trying to legislate things like, certain, I think legislating equality, there's not a problem there, but I think when we start to legislate like convictions, we get off the road, because we need to have a world where people of different religions or no faith at all, different ideas, can live their life freely just as all of us. One of the things that will destroy this work is resentment. And so it's easy to resent others for either their doing this type of work, or resent others who aren't doing this type of work. Often we'll maybe even drain resentment towards someone because we don't feel like that's our calling or what we want to do. And they think, well, don't they think they're precious, or don't they think they're good? But resentment will destroy this type of work if we resent one another. And that's a sneaky one, because it'll go in and it just kind of bites and devours and kind of scratches away at time. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you have this resentment. So it takes time to heal. And so often I think when we find these resentments, we step back. Zoe, they used to talk about loving well, like loving from afar, like, I'm going to love my enemies from afar. And I think they had something, because when Jesus says, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. And I think praying in a way is loving, being able to love that enemy from afar, where they're not affecting your life, where they're not destroying your life. Ask yourself what gets you uncomfortable. What makes me uncomfortable? And then ask yourself, why does it make me uncomfortable? And that, again, is looking at your own side of the street, your own side of the sidewalk, your own responsibilities, rather than scapegoating and always pointing at others, is going, what's making me uncomfortable here? And it could be tribalism, it could be identity, it could be politics. That can all keep us from this work as well. But asking ourselves hard questions like that, it's really tough. This is the part that I started to read a little bit early. I'll finish with this, and then we'll go on with our lovely Sunday. I'm taking the kids swimming. So please put your ears on, and if you really like what you're hearing, please share this with people. Please like and subscribe. Please tell people about this kind of stuff. We only survive with you. I work for you. My compulsion to do this work is amazing, but I can only do it with you. You are literally my employers in my community, so I work with you and for you. But listen to this, what Reverend Martin Luther King said, because I can't say it better. What are the devastating consequences of this narrow group-centered attitude? Listen to that, narrow group-centered attitude. Let's get familiar with that kind of thinking. Narrow group-centered attitude. It means that one does not really mind what happens to people outside of their group. So when we have this narrow group-centered attitude, it means that one does not really mind what happens to people outside of their group, like America or other countries, or, oh, that's just happened to that gay person. I'm straight, so it doesn't. Oh, that's a black issue. Oh, that's a Hispanic issue. Oh, you just because I'm, my group, or I'm a Christian, so it doesn't matter what happens to those Muslims or to those Catholics or whatever. It means that one does not really mind what happens to people outside of their group. If an American is concerned only about, now listen to this, if an American is concerned only about their nation, they will not be concerned about the people of Asia, Africa, or South America, or Palestine, or Israel, or, Is this not why nations engage in the madness of war without the slightest sense of penance? Is this not why the murder of citizens of your own nation is a crime, but the murder of the citizens of another nation in war is an act of heroic virtue? If manufacturers are concerned only with their personal interests, they will pass by the other side while thousands of workers and people are stripped of their jobs and left displaced on some Jericho road as a result of automation. And they will judge every move towards the better distributor of wealth and better life for their workmen to be socialistic. If a white man is concerned only about his race, he will casually pass by the Negro who has been robbed of his personhood, stripped of his sense of dignity, and left dying on some wayside road. I think identity politics, I don't think we can move forward with identity politics. I think they've got us also separated. And the funny thing is, it's not even funny. The horrible thing is that race is really a concept that was really rooted and began earlier in slavery in the South to say whites were better than blacks. And that's where race started to become a big thing. Now we celebrate, we do all this, and I think that's great. We've taken this bad, but we also have to realize is like, it's not our problem. It's a that problem. It's a their problem. It's not my problem. That's when we get into this group-centered attitude, a narrow group-centered attitude. It's bad. That's one of the things. Like I remember people would attack the breakfast project that the Black Panthers did, but I've seen video and there are white kids and there are all sorts of people eating breakfast served by the Black Panthers. I mean, that's why we remember the Black Panthers. And they were this group that thought, well, this is a black rights group, but they loved the poor. They took care of their own. They took people in their community. It wasn't just, no, those kids can't come in here because they have privilege or they should have privilege or this or that. No, these are human beings who are hungry and need a meal and worthy to live and worthy to have a good breakfast before they go to school or before they go to work. So I hope we will get rid of this narrow group-centered attitude. And one way to do it is talk about this stuff, and then you just won't have a group to subscribe to anymore. I mean, man, I got conservative friends. I got progressive friends. I got anarchist friends. I got Marxist friends. I got a few Christian friends left, but all the groups that I used to roll deep in, don't have me anymore. I don't really impress them much anymore or do much with them anymore. And so that's another way where you could get less narrow is just fall out of favor with a lot of people. And then I'm not crying about it. It's bringing me into my purpose. It's what I'm compelled to do. So I'm compelled and I'm willing to pay the price. And I hope we all can be willing to pay the costs of sitting here and going like, oh, I watched my thing drop from 15 to 8. Now, well, it just is. It is what it is, and we live it. And we do it, and we share it, and you guys share it. 8 of you go out there and you share this, and you live this, and realize like, where is my group-centered attitude lie? What can I do to change my group-centered identity? Because I think one of the things I've learned by grace, and even through Jesus and through the Apostle Paul, is that I'm a human first, and then a Christian. I'm a human and a father, and then a Christian. I follow nonviolence. I follow the teachings of Dr. King. I follow the teachings of John Hume. I try to understand the teachings of people like Hegel and things like that, only to say, how can I be better inclusive? How can we embrace compromise? How can we even see something that seems to be complete contradictions, and how can we find a truth, something greater than truth that lies behind this? How can we embrace the dialect in our lives and in the world? And so that's why I like to spend most of my time thinking and writing and putting these things down. It was great. I got to paint by myself one day, and so I found I knew there was a book I wanted to read, but I didn't have the time to do it while I was painting. So I found the book on tape, and I listened to the book on tape, and got that in there because I'm always thinking about this moment here, this hour. I'm either with my kids and thinking about my kids, and try to put this thing on hold a little bit. But this is where I feel my purpose lies, is within this moment and within this time to share this message with you. And I don't need the credit for this message. I just want you to carry this message forward and love each other and start to see humanity in a really different, unique, interesting way that's very inclusive. It doesn't mean you can't have boundaries and things like that. You should have those things, but it means that you're going to learn to say, I don't agree with that person, but that person deserves to live. And that's what the Samaritan did. The Samaritan goes, this guy thinks I'm crap, but he's got to live. That's not what happens to me if I help this person, but what happens to that person if I don't help them. So that's what I want to say is now let's stop thinking about ourselves. I think that was one of the bad things that came out of cancel culture and all that, is that we always like have a little fear that everything's going to be taken away from us, you know. Instead going like, well, what's going to happen to them if I don't speak out? You know, I'm an idiot sometimes, you know. I mean, that's what my teenager self would have been like, Jay, what are you doing? But I'm a happy idiot. So I love people and I'm compelled, and I hope you're compelled. Obviously, some of you are compelled because you're still here. So I love you all very much. And I'm grateful for you all very much for being a part of Revolution. I end every Revolution with having to ask for financial donations because that's where we're at. We're doing a tiny bit better, and I want to thank you all for that. Thank you for your support. We'd almost Freudian slip, but maybe that's right. Almost, but always, we really do want you more than your money. But your money makes this possible and allows me to be here and pay my bills. I'm also doing a part-time job so we can pay more bills, and I live next door to my kids and all that stuff. So if you like what we do, if you want to see this work continue, and you have the ability to do it, don't do it if you're broke and you don't have money and you're not buying groceries either. Don't donate money. Go get groceries. If you have a little extra money, maybe go to a movie. But if you have a little extra, maybe support the work of Revolution so we can continue to do this work and be in your house or wherever you are once a week, or in your ears, wherever you're running or listening or hanging out. Help us do that. And also, if you go on to Instagram or you stay and you follow me on YouTube, you realize I'm starting to put up with these little short videos of vignettes of where I'm at and where I'm thinking. You can see where this talk progressed from compelled to forgive to compelled to like include everybody. So, you know, you can be a part of that evolution as well. But my work is thinking about how we can all live better lives. And I hope I'm doing an okay job. Love you all so much. Peace be with you. Love you guys. And we will see you maybe during the week. Definitely, I will be here next week, and I'm going to try to turn this thing off. Go in grace and start your own revolution of unity through equality.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.